Hello viewers, welcome to this video. In this video, we're going to be looking at another web-based LXD management tool. So in the last video, we saw LXD UI, and this one is called Lxdmosaic. So this one is more, it has got more features than LXD UI. It's more feature rich in that if you compare LXD UI with Lxdmosaic, it has got few extra functionalities like you can manage multiple LXD clusters, multiple LXD instances. In addition, you can also import existing LXD clusters, so which you can't actually do in LXD UI. So in LXD UI, as far as I know, you can connect only to one LXD instance, and it doesn't support importing LXD clusters. It doesn't work with LXD clusters. But this tool, which I'm going to show you today, Lxdmosaic, you can manage multiple LXD instances. They call it standalone instances, and also you can import LXD clusters. So that's what we're going to be looking at. All right, so I've got my little notes here for this video. What we're going to do is, so this is my host laptop, Dell XPS 13, 8 CPU with 16 gig of RAM. And I'm not running Ubuntu 20.04, by the way. Since I wrote this notes, I changed my operating system to Manjaro. So now I'm back to Manjaro i3. So what I'm having in my host machine is I've got a local LXD instance running on my host machine. So if I do LXC list, so I don't have any machines. So that's my host LXC, and I'm also running LXD cluster. So LXD cluster is running on 3 virtual machines. So these 3 virtual machines are Ubuntu 20.04 virtual machines. Sorry about that. They are not containers. They are actually VirtualBox virtual machines. All right. So 3 Ubuntu 20.04 virtual machines, each of them running its own LXD instance, and they've been clustered. So it's running as a cluster, and you can create containers. Okay. So if you want to know, if you haven't watched my previous videos about LXD clustering, I would advise you to watch those videos because that might be helpful, although you don't need that for this video. Let me show you. If I go to YouTube and search for LXD clustering explained. Okay, so you've got these 2 videos, part 1 and part 2. In part 1, I explained how to set up LXD clusters, and in part 2, we played with creating LXD containers and moving the containers between the machines, I think. Okay, so those are the 2 videos about LXD clustering. All right, so what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to install Lxdmosaic. And as per their documentation, the recommended way to install Lxdmosaic is inside an Ubuntu container. Although you can run it in a CentOS container, their recommendation is to go with an Ubuntu container, which is what I'm going to be doing. So we are going to launch an LXD instance on my host machine, LXD container on my host machine, and then we are going to install Lxdmosaic onto it. Okay. So let me go back to my system, and I'll also show the LXD cluster. So let me log into Ubuntu VM 01, which is, sorry, I'm not in the right directory. Vagrant SSH Ubuntu VM 01. So basically I'm logging into this first VM1. So all these are part of LXD clusters. So I should be able to do LXC cluster list. So as you can see here, we've got 3 machines, Ubuntu VM 01, VM 02, and VM 03. And all of them are running LXD, and they are part of the cluster. So once we install Lxdmosaic, first we're going to be importing this LXD instance from my host machine, this LXD instance, and then we will also try and import this existing LXD cluster into the Lxdmosaic web interface. All right, let's go ahead and launch our LXD container, LXC container. Okay, so I'm in here, LXC init Ubuntu 20.04 Lxdmosaic. So once that's created, we're going to start that LXC container, LXC start Lxdmosaic, and then we also gonna go to the GitHub repository for Lxdmosaic. There it is. I'll put a link to this GitHub repository in the video description. Okay, so I'm gonna go down here. And basically you need to set these 2 options before you can import clusters or LXD instances into Lxdmosaic. Okay, basically this one allows network access into the LXD instance or LXD clusters, and this one is just setting up the password. So when you are importing clusters or LXD instance into Lxdmosaic, you need this password. Okay, so I'm going to run these 2 commands on my host machine. You also need to run this command on one of these virtual machines when you are importing the cluster. It's enough to set this on just one VM because they're all part of the cluster. So if you run the command on one machine, it's going to affect the entire cluster. Okay, let's do it on my LXD instance now. Okay, so I'm also going to surround that with double quotes because sometimes the shell might treat it differently. And I'm also going to set the password. LXD config sed core.trust password. Paste that. I'm going to change this to, let's say, admin. Okay, so that's done. Okay, while we are here, let's also do this one here. Let's log into Ubuntu VM01 and run this command first. Okay, paste that. Okay, that's done. I'm not going to run the second command here because if you followed my LXD clustering setup, we've already done this. When you do LXD init, on the first node of the cluster, you would have already set the admin password. So I've set the admin password as admin, so I don't have to do this command on the LXD cluster. Okay, so we're going to get into the container that we just created. So on my host machine, Lxdexec, let's first do Lxd list. Okay, that's running. Lxdexec, Lxdmosaic bash. Okay, so we are inside the container and we're gonna download the install script. So it's gonna be very easy. They also support CentOS 7, but that is gonna be a different install script. But since we are using Ubuntu 20.04, we're gonna follow this commands here. So basically we are downloading an install script and then we're gonna run that install script. So let's copy that, paste that, that's done, and set the executable permission to the install script and then just run the install script. Okay, so what this install script is doing is it's downloading all the package dependencies from the Ubuntu repository, as well as it's going to download loads of Node.js modules. So it's going to take a few minutes and I'm going to pause the video and come back when it's done. Alright, the command completed. It took about 3 minutes. So once the install script completed the installation, so you would see something like this: installation successful, and we just need to point our browser to this IP address, which is the IP address of this Linux container. So if I click this link, and this is a self-signed certificate, so you need to accept the warning. And the default username is admin and the default password is test123. Okay, so that's our Lxdmosaic. We're going to add our first LXD instance. So basically I'm going to add this LXD instance so that we can start interacting with this LXD instance. Okay, so this is running on my host machine and the IP address of my laptop host machine is 192.168.1.81. So let's add that. 192.168.1.81, and the trust password is the password that I set, which is admin. And you can give some meaningful name here, like an alias, or if you want, you can do that always later. Okay, so that's what it is. And if I click on this host here, so we've got standalone host, we just imported this one. And if I click on that one, it shows some nice stats about the instance. If I expand this little arrow here, so that's the container that's running in this LXD instance. So at the moment, we only have one Linux container running in this instance. So while I'm here, I'm also going to edit this host and give it a meaningful name. Let's call it my Dell host. Save. Okay, so that looks a lot better now, my Dell host. Okay, so first thing first, so we used the admin user account and the password, which is test123, to log into this dashboard. So the first thing is you need to change the admin password. So go to the settings here, and there's this admin user, and we can change it here. So I'm going to change that to test321, submit. Okay, so now we need to verify if the password change was successful. So I need to log out. But I don't see in this user interface any buttons or any links to log out. So I don't know if I'm missing something or I don't know. So the way I found to log out is, don't worry about this. I'm using Qt browser. So basically in your address bar, go to the URL and then just type in logout and we are logged out. Again, admin user and with the new password, which is test321. So cool, it worked fine. But let's do one more thing. In the settings page, let's create another user. Okay, so the first user is always the admin user, and I'm going to create another user. Let's call it Venkat N. The password is just admin. Submit. Okay, you can see here Venkat N. I'm not the admin user. I don't know whether we can modify a user or add him give him admin privilege. I don't see any options here. Okay, so if I edit it, I would only be able to change the password. That's it. So there's going to be one admin user, which is this user. The username is admin. You won't be able to add any more admin users. Okay, so let's log out again and see what difference we can see by logging in as this new user, which is not an admin user. Okay, so again, going to the URL, typing in logout and logging in as Venkat N with the password. Okay, so everything looks the same. I can see the containers and so on. If I go to the settings page, I don't see the user section, and I can't remember what I saw here in this area, but few of the panels are actually missing. So that makes sense because this user is not an admin user. Okay, let's log out again and log in as the admin user. Test 321. Okay, cool. So now what we're going to do is look at some of the user interface. Let's explore the user interface. Okay, so on the left here, we are in the dashboard pane. We've got the standalone host. If you add multiple LXD instance, you're gonna see all of them here. So we've got the LXD instance. Expand the arrow, and so you would see all the containers running in this host. So at the moment we only have one container, and if I click on that, so that's the stats about the container. So we've got create image, creating an image out of this running container, or you can configure settings. You can create a snapshot of this container. You can copy this container, copy instance. It's basically like, I think, cloning, and you've got the option to migrate instance. So when you have multiple LXD instances here added to your Lxdmosaic interface, you might be able to move your container from one LXD instance to another LXD instance. And here these two options are disabled, so you obviously won't be able to delete while the containers are running. So how do you interact with the container? So change state, there's a drop down here which enables you to start, stop, restart, pause or unpause your containers. But I would, from the usability point of view, instead of having a drop down, it would make a lot easier. It would make a lot sense if they've got the buttons like these to start, stop, or shut down the instances. But anyway, that's there, and we've got backups, we've got files. I don't know why metrics is disabled, and there's also the console section. Okay, so when you do lxc exec the container name bash, you get a shell into the running container. So similarly, you get it here, but everything is going to be within the web browser. So if I click on go, we now have the shell for the running container. So I can do cat etc os release ubuntu 2004. So we are inside the container. Okay, so that's cool. And on the top here, we have backups. We don't have any backup. Cloud config, deployments, we don't have any deployments. Images. Okay, so when you click on images, so there's this LXD instance that we added, and if I expand that, I have these two LXC images downloaded to my LXD instance. So if I do LXC image list, yeah, I have Ubuntu 2004 and Debian Buster. That's what you see here, Ubuntu on Debian Buster. So it's going to list all the images on each of your LXD instances that you've added here. And here's the list of image if you want to download. Say for example, if I want to download CentOS 7 AMD64 default. So if I select that and click import, my Dell host, which is this host here, the only host we've got, and click add, and you see image import started. And you also get a nice little information about what's actually going on, all your previous operations. So we executed the command, we are downloading the image, so the image download is now complete. So I should be able to see the CentOS image. Maybe if I go to somewhere else and come back here. Yep, so we've got the CentOS 7 image. If I go in here and do LXC image list, there we go, we've got CentOS 7. Okay, if I go to the dashboard, so now you see there are some graphs here and images. Okay, so that's the image. Network tab, click on the LXD instance where you want to explore the networks. So I've got LXDBR0 IP address and the list of profiles using this particular network. So we've got the default profile, we've also got the Lxdmosaic container, the profiles, the containers that are using this particular network. Okay, so profiles, if I expand that, we've got only one profile, the default profile. with the network device and the root file system. Projects, I don't have any project, I'm using the default project. Storage, so if I expand that, I've got the default storage, so that's the default storage pool. Settings, we already saw the settings. Okay, so what else we're gonna see? Create a container. Okay, now let's see how to create a container. So there's this button here to create a container. Let's do that. Give it a name. Let's call it my CentOS container. Instance type, I don't know, that's optional, but it lists all the instance type from AWS as well as from Azure, Google Cloud, and so on. But I'm just launching a simple LXD container, so I don't need to select any of these. Host to create on, so my Dell host. All right, profile, default profile, that's the only profile we've got. Image, okay, so I had a problem earlier when I was testing this because when I was trying to search for an image, it didn't actually show anything. The way it's supposed to work is if you've got an image downloaded to your LXD instance, for example, in our LXD instance that we imported into Lxdmosaic, we have these three images. So when I start typing CentOS, Ubuntu, or Debian, it should pop up these three images, these three in the drop down list, but it always returned no results. So there was a bug, there was a very similar bug reported last year and it was fixed, but somehow it cropped into the code again. So I reported this bug in his GitHub repository, and this guy fixed it in about 3 hours. So right in time for the recording of this video. So now if I start typing the container name CentOS, yeah, I've got the CentOS, I've got the Debian Buster, Ubuntu. Okay, let's go with CentOS container. All right, create container, creating container, and if I expand this, so we've got my CentOS, which is created but not started. So again, if I go in here to LXD list, we have my CentOS. Okay, let's start that container. Change state, start the container, starting my Dell. Okay, so that's running. It's showing the memory usage, what profile it's using, whether it has any snapshots or not, disk usage, network information. It's showing the IPv6 at the moment, but I think if I refresh it, yeah, so now it's showing both IPv4 and IPv6. Okay, so that's how you create the container. Now I'm gonna stop the container. Stopping the container, let's also delete the container. Okay, so delete the container. Okay, cool. So that's done. So that's how you add the container. You can add container. When you're creating a container, it's going to ask you which host to create on. So as you know, we only have this one host added to our Lxdmosaic web interface. So we added it to that host. Okay, now let's try and import the LXD cluster, which I was talking about. So this cluster. So we have this LXD instance managed by the Lxdmosaic. But now let's try and add this LXD cluster. When I tried it before recording this video, I had a problem importing this cluster and it messed up the whole Lxdmosaic UI. So it rendered it non-functional. So let's try and see if it works this time. It may not work. So when you're adding a new LXD cluster into Lxdmosaic, it's sufficient to add just one of the instance. You don't have to add all the three of or all the nodes in your LXD cluster. All right, so go in here, so click on this button, server, and put in the IP address or the DNS host name of one of the node in your cluster. Okay, so I'm going to say 172.42.42.101. So that's the first node in the cluster. Password is admin. Add. Okay, yeah, so that's the exact error that I had previously. Okay, anyways, it didn't actually work. I don't know why. You guys please give it a try, and if you have succeeded, let me know in the comments. I would be happy to hear that. But that's what it is. So I couldn't import the existing LXD cluster. But if I go in here, if you look in the snapshots, I can show you one of the snapshots here. Okay, if you look in here, that's a standalone host. They've got one standalone host with all these containers, and they've also imported a couple of clusters with 2 nodes each. So that's what I was expecting when I tried adding the cluster, but That's it. So if I go to dashboard now, I've get all sorts of errors, and I don't actually see any of the LXD instance that I previously added. So it's completely broke. If I go in here, okay, so anywhere I go, I get that error, and now I'm not able to use my previous LXD instance, this one here, which I added earlier. So that's completely broken. In order to fix that, I found a way, which is, by the way, this tool Lxdmosaic uses MySQL as the backend. It stores all the data in MySQL. So if you want to back up Lxdmosaic, you just need to back up that MySQL database. That's it. So let's go into exec Lxdmosaic. So I'm logging into this LXD container where we've installed Lxdmosaic, and we're gonna get into MySQL and edit the database. Okay, so let me move that to the top. All right, so if I do MySQL show databases, and we have this LXD manager database, use LXD manager show tables, okay, there is this hosts table which we are going to edit. So if I show you select star from hosts, okay, as you can see here, we've got 4 hosts. So it has actually added all the nodes from our cluster, but for some reason it's showing me some error. So that's the first host we added, and we named it my Dell host, you can see here, and that's the IP address 192.168.1.81, which is my machine's IP address. So that's the first LXD instance we imported, and then we imported this host 172.42.42.101, the first node in the LXD cluster. So it actually found all the other nodes in the cluster and it added it to the database, but for some reason it's not working as expected. So the way I sorted this out is just remove these 3 entries from this table, and we should see that working again. Okay, so delete from hosts, where, what is it, host alias, let's use host ID in 2, 3, 4. Okay, 3 rows deleted. Select star from hosts. Okay, so now we are back to 1 host. All right, so now if I go back here, and yeah, if I refresh it, so now we are back to how it was. So you can add multiple LXD instances, but try and add an LXD cluster. If you succeed, please let me know. What we did was we had an LXD instance on our host machine. We installed a container, we started a container, and then we installed Lxdmosaic into this container, and then we imported this LXD instance, and we started monitoring, we started managing, creating containers, and so on. We tried importing LXD cluster, but it didn't work out. Okay, so that's one method of installing Lxdmosaic, but there's also another way of installing Lxdmosaic, which I haven't actually tried. There is a snap store. If you're using Ubuntu or any Linux distribution, make sure to install snapd. I think in Ubuntu 20.04 it comes by default. So in here, so I'm on my host machine, and let me show you. Snap search Lxdmosaic. Yeah, so there is a snapcraft package Lxdmosaic. So try installing this. Okay, maybe I should try it. Sudo snap install Lxdmosaic. All right, it's asking whether I want to go with the beta or the edge version. So let's go with -- beta. But before that, let's go ahead and close this. And I'm also going to LXC list, delete this LXC container, LXC delete Lxdmosaic. So we've completely deleted the container where we installed Lxdmosaic. So I'm just going to give it a try, the snap package that we've got. So if it works, it's going to be an easier way. Instead of having a separate container where you can install Lxdmosaic, I could actually use snap package. It's going to be a lot easier, but it's in the beta version, and as per their GitHub documentation, the recommended way is to launch a container and install it inside the container. And they've mentioned it to be Ubuntu 18 or 20, and they've also got a script to install on CentOS 7. Okay, let's try this out. Okay, so that's done. Sudo snap install Lxdmosaic. That has installed Lxdmosaic. So what does that mean? So here, if I do sudo netstat -nltp, you can see here there is an Apache web server httpd, and there is a MySQLD process running. So I think these are the two new entries. I don't know what other services it has actually installed. Maybe this node here, node 3000, and we've also got port 443. So that's my LXD instance, and again 8001. So I think it's MySQL 3306, port 80 httpd, and port 443, node port 3000, and node port 8001. Okay, so now let's try and hit port 80. Just go to localhost. Oh cool, there we go. And if I do the same username and password, admin test123. Cool. Okay, that's good. Okay, let's try and import our cluster, our LXD instance 192.168.1.81. admin done. All right, cool. So it equally works. That's good. Okay, so this is another way of installing Lxdmosaic. I think I would prefer this way, Snapcraft. Although it's in the beta version, I would prefer this way. It's so much easier. Okay, so I think that's all I wanted to show you in this video. Please give this a try. It's a nice tool, but I would prefer using the command line. But if you've got multiple LXD clusters to manage, I think this one would be of very much help. All right, give this a try. If you've got any questions or feedback or any issues, let me know in the comments. I'll be able to help. And make sure to subscribe. I'll see you all in my next video. Bye-bye.